The night the sirens crawled up my gravel road, I was asleep on the pine floor of my grandfather's cabin boots for a pillow, my father's folded flag under my arm. That's the truth. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't running. I came to breathe that kind of air you only get when a creek talks to its stones and the wind knows your name. Then floodlights bleached the porch silver, and a bullhorn told me to come out with my hands where they could see them. I sat up slow. My back complained. The place smelled like cedar and old coffee. What hurt more than the rifle on the deputy's shoulder or the shouts in the yard was the neighbor's voice, sharp as a broken jar, screaming that I was a trespasser on community property. Called the cops because a pickup she didn't recognize sat under the pecan tree. Because a porch light burned past 9, because she didn't like being reminded this land existed before her bylaws were stapled together in some office park. Name? The deputy asked when I stepped outside, hands open. Prom voice, professional. He wasn't there to make trouble. His partner was jumpy, and the neighbor hair sprayed to deflect hail filmed like she'd busted a bank robber. She said vagrant. She said dangerous. She pointed at my truck like it was a weapon. My name's Tom, I said. This is my cabin. Incorrect, she snapped. It's common area. The board voted last month. That porch is ours. You're on HOA land. You will be prosecuted. Something inside me went cold. Not angry, yet cold. Clin-edged. I've learned to breathe when that feeling comes. I told the deputy the key hangs on a nail under the porch beam. Told him the nails were hammered by my grandfather the summer he raised this place after the war. When his hands were steady and his voice was loud, told him my family has slept on these boards since before her cul-de-sacs had names. His eyes went to the triangle in my arm. You serve? No, my dad did. I promised him I'd keep this place standing. The neighbor, her name was Karen, and she leaned into it, laughed like I'd told a joke. She waved papers, covenants, and restrictions. No overnight occupancy in unapproved structures. No parking beyond decorative boulders. No unapproved flags or signage. She tipped her phone at the flag, hungry for scandal, especially political ones. It's a funeral flag, the deputy said, snap in his voice. He pushed his hat up. Sir, ID. I handed it over. The other deputy shifted his rifle. The creek kept talking, steady as a metronome. Past the cruisers, I saw the hill where the oak leans. I saw my father there too, back when his hands still worked, and he taught me to dig straight post holes. A fence is more than a boundary, he'd say. It's a promise to be a good neighbor. Tom, the deputy said, returning my ID. We've had calls all week, trailers, trucks, generator noise. Your name never came up. That's because I don't report to them, I said, still calm. This cabin's on my grandfather's deeded parcel. Creek's the north line. 2 pecans mark the east. The oak is the corner. Nobody asked the board to bless this place when we dug it out of the dirt, and I won't start now. Karen stepped closer. Our covenants supersede any so-called deeds if the board declares a nuisance. She smiled like she'd found a new clause to swing. You've been notified. Anger came, hot, bright, clean. Not at rules. At the way she said so-called, it's like a lifetime could be crossed out by a vote taken in a carpeted room. I set my father's flag gently on the rail and stood straight. Ma'am, I'll leave the porch light on for you, but I won't be leaving this porch. I'll slow down, the deputy said. Slow down? She barked. Arrest him. The deputy looked at me longer, like trying to place a face from somewhere else. I saw the moment he found it. His shoulders loosened. Respect slid into his voice. Tom, you're Thomas R. Carter? That's right. He glanced at his partner, then at Karen. From the Carter Land Trust. Also right. Karen rolled her eyes. What's that, some Facebook group? The deputy almost smiled. Ma'am, the Carter Trust isn't a group. It's why this county has the roads it has. why the river park exists, why the sheriff's office sits on land it doesn't pay for. He turned to me. Sir, sorry for the trouble. We'll sort this, Karen sputtered, clinging to her script. I don't care whose name is on some old paper. We have rules. He sleeps here again, we fine him. Tomorrow, we tow. Next week, we remove this unlawful structure. She jabbed a finger at the porch like it had insulted her. I let disbelief wash over me and go. Action beats argument. Deputy, step inside a second. I've got something to show you, he followed. I lifted the floorboard under the stove, the same board my granddad lifted when he hid coffee money from. Self-and brought out a canvas satchel wrapped in wax paper. The original deed. The survey with the creek line. The 1974 memorandum establishing the Carter Land and Water Trust. A letter from the county recorder certifying mineral and timber rights running. Like roots under half the county rights, my father never flaunted, only guarded. The way a decent neighbor guards a fence, the deputy read. Whistled low, snapped pictures for his report. When we stepped back out, the night felt different. The second deputy had lowered his rifle. The cicadas picked up their electric hymn. Ma'am, the first deputy said, courteous but firm. This cabin is private property outside your HOA. You lack authority here. This gentleman may sit on his porch, park under that tree, and sleep with his father's flag on his chest if that's what he needs tonight. For a beat, silence. Then Karen's voice, thin and furious. This isn't over, I said, not unkindly. It isn't. Porch light hummed. The creek kept talking. I set the flag across my knees like a promise. That's when I understood this fight wasn't about bylaws. It was about memory. And I was done asking permission to remember. By sunrise, I'd brewed coffee, the old whey saucepan, grounds, patience. Up on the ridge, porch lights winked out. Sprinklers ticked. A jogger tried outpace middle age. Mist lifted off the creek like breath on a cold mirror. I'd slept an hour at most, but I felt steady. Deputies gone, report filed. Karen gone, rage intact. The cabin stayed. So did I. The paper fence came quick. Certified letter. Board letterhead with a tiny oak leaf as if they'd trademarked nature. Fines for overnight occupancy in an unapproved structure. Vehicle storage on common land, and my favorite display of an unapproved flag. The total was circled in red, as if ink could make it moral. Below it, threats of escalating penalties and possible lien action. Bullies love paper. Paper doesn't tremble when it's wrong. People do. I didn't call their number. I called the county recorder. Morning, Tom, she said, like I'd phoned to ask about her grandkids. That's how small counties are. What are you digging up now? Just the lines, I said. Certified copies of the 1951 deed, the 74 trust memo, and the plat showing the creek boundary. She laughed. You mean the one I have framed because your daddy gave it to me my first week on the job? Come by after lunch. I drove in with the windows down, cut hay and diesel in the air. The courthouse was cool and dim, salt-tan pepper tile worn by other people's fights. The recorder handed me a folder thick with my family's handwriting. Paper that did shake because the men who signed it were alive when they did. Ink with calluses in it. I read every line like tracing a scar. The Carter Land and Water Trust didn't own the whole county like folks joked. Ownership doesn't work like that, and I wouldn't want it if it did. The trust held something older and quieter, parcels and easements, timber and mineral rights, and a stewardship packed with the county leverage to keep creeks clear and roads honest. We donated land for the school, the river park, the sheriff's lot, with one condition: the county would never sell them off. We gave and we guarded. That was the balance. On my way out, I ran into Sheriff Dean. He squeezed my shoulder like checking if I was still solid. Heard you had late-night company, he said. 3 if you count the bullhorn, I said. He chuckled. Karen thinks if it doesn't match the catalog, it's a crime. If this heads to court, tell me. We'll keep it peaceful. I'll bring coffee. Back at the cabin, 2 board members waited in matching cement-colored polos. Timeshare smiles. They slid forms across the rail. Good news, one said. We can get you into compliance with a few simple steps. I don't live under your roof, I said, and you don't live under mine. They pushed on, like volume could change gravity. This common area is managed by... Stop, I said, letting disbelief harden into clarity. You can't manage what you don't own. Not this porch. Not this dirt. Not the right to tell a son where he sets his father's flag. I handed the forms back. What you do own is the mess you make if you keep pushing. They blinked. One adjusted his watch. The other shifted his weight. Not used to a no without an apology. We'd hate to escalate, the tall one said. Escalate where? I asked. To the county? You'll find me there with records older than your curbs. To court? We'll put every page on a projector and let a judge see which lines were drawn in ink and which were typed last year under a logo. Smiles went brittle. We'll see you at the hearing, they said, threat, dressed as calendar invite. The paper fence grew. Notices on my gate. Emails warning neighbors I was occupying common land and endangering community safety. Photos of my truck in the HOA newsletter with arrows and captions like a crime scene. Folks who knew me waved bigger. Folks who didn't looked away. Emotion burns hot. Respect burns steady. I chose steady. Fixed the porch steps. Reset the loose stones at the creek crossing. Replaced the screen door hinge that had thwacked me since I was 12. And I walked the lines at dusk, the way my father taught, meat touching each marker. Oak, caught. Creek rock, quietly naming them so I wouldn't forget. Then came the twist that changed the temperature. A certified notice not from the HOA, from their lawyer. They'd seek a declaratory judgment to clarify title and jurisdiction over the cabin and its surrounds. Attached was a plat, not the county's. A glossy developer map with a shaded, block-labeled common recreation parcel that swallowed my porch like a shadow, that didn't match the sun. I took it to the recorder. She laughed so hard she had to sit. They photocopied a marketing map and called it a plat, she wheezed. Tom, they're bringing a pamphlet to a history class. Ignorance is one thing. Weaponized ignorance is another. I called a meeting. Not in their lemon water clubhouse, but at County Hall, where the ceilings are high and the flags are real. I invited the board, neighbors, the sheriff, if anyone who wanted to see papers stand next to people. I set my father's flag on the table like a witness and carried in a cedar box my grandfather built with those square, steady hands. Inside, the deed, the surveys, the trust memo, and a 1952 photo my grandfather and 3 neighbors raising this frame by hand. Shirts off. Sun freckles. Sweat dark smiles. The gavel tapped. The room settled. We'll be good neighbors, I said. But we will not be erased. For the first time since the sirens, I felt the county lean my way. Not for my last name. Not for any myth about who owns what. Because the lines were honest. Because the creek still ran where it always had. Because a fence is a promise. The hearing drew a crowd bigger than a Friday game. Land, flags, and who gets to tell whom to sit down, word travels fast. The HOA arrived pressed and polished. Their lawyer carried a binder big enough to block a door. I carried the cedar box and a satchel of copies. Sheriff Dean stood in back, hat in hand. The recorder sat up front, proud as an ant. The judge was the kind who reads every footnote and trims his own hedges. We're here, he said, to determine jurisdiction over the parcel known as the cabin. Counselor. Their lawyer clicked through a slide, show boundaries, bylaws, committee votes. Photos of my truck under the pecan, email screenshots with subject lines like, urgent trespasser. He spoke well. Used words like harmonize, nuisance, aesthetic integrity. He clicked to the shaded marketing map and called it a plat. He said, community a lot. As if volume could make my porch part of his meeting. My turn. No throat clearing. No apology for air. I set the cedar box down and spread the real plat creased coffee stained under the document camera. The creek line flowed in blue ink like it had a heartbeat. I pointed to the oak, the pecans, the corner rock, chiseled by a surveyor whose name you can still read. Then the trust memorandum, my father's signature, pausing like it always did before the R, the recorder's certification. Finally, the 1952 photograph. 4 men lifting a wall with their backs and their pride. This isn't a museum. The HOA lawyer objected. No, the judge said. It's evidence. He peered over his glasses. Counselor, do you have a county-recorded plat contradicting this? A pause. Then a gesture to the brochure. The judge removed his glasses. That is not a plat. That is a brochure. Turned to me. Mr. Carter, chain of title is clear. Yes, Your Honor, deed. 1951. Trust memo. 1974. Easements noted and respected. HOA formed decades later. No jurisdiction over this parcel. Understood. His pen moved. Neat. Final. Ruling. The cabin and immediate grounds lie outside the HOA's authority. Notices and fines are void. Further attempts to assert jurisdiction will be considered harassment. He looked at the board. Neighbors are not enemies. Remember that. Justice isn't fireworks. It's a breath you didn't know you were holding, finally let go. The recorder squeezed my arm. The sheriff grinned. Their lawyer packed up with the quiet of a man who studied for the wrong test. Karen wasn't there. She'd stopped coming when the story stopped fitting her favorite words. I wasn't finished. I asked to address the room. The judge nodded. I could end it here, I said, and go sleep on my porch. That'd be fine. But a fence is a promise, not a prison. So here's mine. I pointed to the map. The Carter Trust holds rights scattered across this county. We've used them to keep parks open and roads straight. Today we add one. A recorded easement guaranteeing foot access. Along this creek for any neighbor who wants to walk it without fear of a fine. No motors, no trash, no cameras in windows. Just a path where kids can hunt crawdads and old men can remember what their backs used to do. The room softened because people like to be invited more than instructed, and generosity cuts through noise like a bell. The judge smiled. That's the kind of jurisdiction I like to see. The board chair stood reared, reading the wind. On behalf of the HOA, he said carefully, we appreciate the spirit of cooperation. We'll update our records. He didn't say apologize. The word is heavy when you're used to winning. But he didn't say lean either. Sometimes silence is progress. I drove home through sun that turned hayfields into coins. Under the pecan, the porch looked like it could breathe again. I set my father's flag on the table and made saucepan coffee, same as always. Then I walked the creek. Boots soft. Eyes open. At the slow bend, I found a boy barefooting in the mud. A girl skipping stones, and their grandfather teaching them how to see a fish move without the water telling on it. He tipped his hat. I tipped back. No papers traded hands. No bylaws recited. That's neighbor enough for me. At dusk, when the cicadas tuned up, I tapped a nail into the porch beam and hung a new brass key. I called the sheriff, told him the path was recorded. Called the recorder, thanked her for keeping stories straight. Then I slid the cedar box back under the stove. These fights end, but new ones always start quiet. The cabin sighed in the cooling air like a dog settling. I won't claim I own the whole county. That's barbershop talk, told with a wink. I own my part. A cabin on a creek, a flag that smells like cedar, and the promise to be the kind of neighbor my father was. What the trust holds isn't power. It's responsibility. and responsibility is heavier than a binder of rules. It's a fence you check at dusk, and a path you keep open in daylight. The lake was calm again, and for the first time in years. So was I. A fence can keep trouble out, but the best ones have a gate you're not afraid to open. Faced an HOA like this? Share your story in the comments. I read every one. If you believe some fights are worth having, hit subscribe. And let's stand up together. This story is just the beginning. There is so much more ahead. Subscribe to the channel to join me on this journey.